until the eye gouge. Nobody brings eye gouges on themselves. This is the same as, oh, she brings it on herself with the push-off. Just call the hand check and the push-off doesn't happen. Like, do we not understand the sport of basketball? It's like when you watch Luka play Lou Dort in the Western Conference semifinals last year. Lou Dort is literally manhandling Luka. So Luka's shoving Lou Dort off. And then everyone's like, oh, Luka is pushing off. And it's like, yeah, of course he is. Lou Dort's playing rugby out there.
Recent discussions in basketball media have centered around a controversial perspective regarding Indiana Fever star Caitlin Clark and the physical treatment she receives on the court. Various sports commentators and analysts have promoted the viewpoint that Clark bears responsibility for the aggressive behavior directed toward her during games. Media personalities have constructed a narrative suggesting that Clark's reputation as someone who engages in verbal sparring with opponents justifies the rough physical contact she encounters. This reasoning follows a logical pathway that begins with acknowledging Clark's tendency to engage in competitive banter, but reaches conclusions that many consider problematic. The fundamental flaw in this reasoning becomes apparent when examining specific incidents that have occurred during WNBA contests. While competitive verbal exchanges represent a normal aspect of professional basketball, certain physical actions cross boundaries that cannot be justified by any amount of on-court communication.
Well, I agree with that. Yeah, I agree with that. And then just all of a sudden it's like, oh, I don't agree with that. Wait, what? What are you talking about? What's going on here? So if you guys don't know, basically what Monica McNutt did yesterday, it says here, she applauds the intensity and defends competitive spirit. And like, the conclusion Monica McNutt came to was that Lindsay Allen should not have been ejected for going up and grabbing Sophie Cunningham by the neck. That JC Sheldon should not have been.
Two particular situations have drawn significant attention and controversy. During games involving the Indiana Fever, Clark experienced what many observers characterized as deliberately dangerous contact that went beyond typical basketball competition. In one incident involving J.C. Sheldon, video analysis revealed contact near Clark's facial area that appeared to make contact with her eye region. Basketball analysts noted that Sheldon's positioning relative to the ball's location made it difficult to categorize the contact as incidental. The distance between Sheldon and the actual play raised questions about intent, particularly given the immediate follow-up action where additional physical contact occurred. A separate situation involved Marina Mabrey delivering what numerous observers described as a blindside impact that caught Clark completely unaware. The nature of this contact, occurring away from active play, sparked debates about whether such actions constitute acceptable basketball conduct or cross into territory that endangers player safety.
Like, Caitlin Clark has been hit with a lot of things, with like multiple shots that would be disqualifications in MMA. But yeah, it's something that I just think is really, really annoying. I think it's really, really annoying to hear. And it's from people being like, oh yeah, you know, Caitlin's a trash talk. It's the Gino Auriemma stuff all over again, being like, oh, Caitlin brings it on herself. Yeah, you know,
basketball history provides numerous examples of intense physical play and competitive rivalries. The Jordan rules employed by the Detroit Pistons during the late 1980s and early 1990s represented an era when physical intimidation was more widely accepted. However, many current analysts argue that using decades-old examples to justify contemporary behavior represents flawed reasoning. Legendary players like Larry Bird face significant physical challenges due to their competitive nature and verbal sparring abilities. The difference lies in distinguishing between hard but legitimate basketball plays and actions that serve no basketball purpose beyond intimidation or retaliation. Modern basketball has evolved to prioritize player safety while maintaining competitive intensity. The league's current standards recognize that verbal competition should not escalate into potentially injurious physical confrontation.
Ejected or she should not have been given a flagrant for clawing Caitlin Clark in the eye. That Caitlin Clark deserved the technical foul for retaliating to getting clawed in the eye. And by the way, I think you could argue Caitlin Clark deserved a technical foul in the first half. Not for that. Not for that. When she kind of got into it with Sheldon and kind of pushed her off, if you wanted to hear up for that, I actually think there's grounds for a technical foul on that one. I don't think there's any grounds for a technical.
Prominent sports media figures, including established television personalities, have promoted the narrative that Clark's competitive communication style makes her a legitimate target for aggressive treatment. This perspective fails to distinguish between appropriate competitive responses and dangerous physical actions. The apparent double standard becomes evident when comparing treatment of similar situations involving other players. When other WNBA stars engage in comparable verbal competition, the physical responses they receive rarely reach the same level of intensity or danger that Clark has experienced. Recent examples from other leagues, such as the unrivaled basketball competition, demonstrate how verbal sparring typically results in increased competitive intensity and counter-communications rather than dangerous physical retaliation. Players respond to trash talk with improved performance and verbal responses, not with actions that risk injury.
What I mean this when I say this. Like, Larry Bird brought some hard fouls on himself. There's a difference between a hard foul and another team playing pinball with you. There's a difference between a hard foul than an eye gouge into a belly bump, and while you're trying to regain your composure from the belly bump, getting knocked on your ass from behind. That's not broad in anyone. And by the way, like, we had an investigation because Caitlin Clark.
Professional basketball naturally includes physical contact, competitive banter, and emotional intensity. However, clear boundaries exist between legitimate basketball actions and behavior that crosses into dangerous territory. Appropriate responses to verbal competition include elevated play, strategic adjustments, and competitive communication in return. These responses maintain the competitive spirit while respecting player safety and game integrity. Inappropriate responses involve actions that serve no basketball purpose and primarily aim to intimidate, injure, or retaliate outside the normal flow of competition. Such actions include contact targeting vulnerable areas, blindside impacts away from play, and deliberate attempts to compromise player safety.
Foul on the one she actually got her technical foul in, because I'm sorry, if you get clawed in the eye and then somebody goes up to you and belly bumps you and you kind of shove them off, I'm sorry, like, we cannot tee people up for being, because, like, if the logic is now that you can get pushed around and if you retaliate it's a technical foul, then the tactic to stop any player in the league, by the way, that's any player, Caitlin Clark.
The officiating response to these incidents has drawn criticism for apparent inconsistency. While some situations involving Clark resulted in technical fouls assessed against her for relatively minor reactions, more significant infractions by opposing players sometimes received minimal penalties or no calls at all. This disparity in enforcement creates an environment where players engaging in dangerous behavior face limited consequences, while victims of such behavior receive penalties for natural defensive reactions. The message this sends undermines both player safety and competitive fairness. Basketball at the professional level involves inherent physical risks, but leagues maintain responsibility for minimizing unnecessary dangers. When actions clearly exceed normal basketball contact and target vulnerable areas like the head, neck, or joints, they require serious attention regardless of any verbal provocation.
Clark flagrantly fouled someone who had taunted her in the past. Who had not only taunted her, but jumped up and celebrated her getting flagrantly fouled. Caitlin Clark flagrantly fouled that person and it spawned a damn investigation. But Caitlin Clark pushes off because she gets hand-checked a lot. So she pushes off a lot. And apparently, she trash-talks AC Sheldon, so that's grounds for Marina Mabrey to hip-check her, to blindside her.
Medical experts emphasize that certain types of contact, particularly around the facial area and joints, carry significant injury risks that extend far beyond the immediate game situation. Players' long-term health and career longevity depend on maintaining boundaries around such contact. The media narrative surrounding these incidents influences how similar situations will be perceived and handled in the future. When prominent voices suggest that verbal competition justifies dangerous physical responses, it establishes precedents that could affect all players. Young players and fans observe how these situations are discussed and resolved. The messages sent about acceptable behavior and appropriate responses shape the culture of basketball at all levels.
A'ja Wilson would be, you put one player on her to just piss her off, start shoving her, commit a technical foul, and like just hold her, just hug her. Hug her, belly bump her, do everything. And just anyone in the league. And just wait for them to retaliate in any way, and it's going to be one technical foul, and then you sub that player off, and you get another player to do it, so that two players in your team take technical fouls each and kick someone out. Like, it sets an awful precedent. But one of the craziest things is Monica McNutt basically said the referees did a great job.
Basketball history demonstrates numerous examples of how elite competitors respond to verbal challenges through improved performance rather than dangerous physical actions. The most memorable rivalries often feature intense verbal exchanges paired with elevated basketball play. Players can respond to competitive banter by increasing their scoring output, making crucial defensive plays, or leading their teams to victory. These responses maintain competitive integrity while avoiding actions that compromise safety. The ongoing debate about Clark's treatment reveals fundamental questions about the boundaries of acceptable behavior in professional basketball. While competitive communication represents a normal aspect of elite sports, using it to justify potentially dangerous physical actions crosses important lines.
Like, that is the dumbest logic I've ever seen. By that logic, I mean this. Like, that's literally like saying, Caitlin Clark one time yelled, "Ball don't lie," so they met up after the game, they beat the crap out of her. Like, it's not actually that far off that. Like, look, I'm not going to go and say, like, oh, she got assaulted. But if Marina Mabrey did what Caitlin did to Caitlin Clark on the street, blindside someone, just shoved them, it is considered assault. I'm not going to say.
Media narratives that suggest players bring dangerous treatment upon themselves through verbal competition fail to recognize crucial distinctions between appropriate competitive responses and actions that compromise player safety. As professional basketball continues to evolve, maintaining these distinctions becomes essential for protecting all players while preserving the competitive intensity that makes the sport compelling. The precedents established in handling these situations will influence how similar incidents are perceived and addressed throughout the league, ensuring that verbal competition does not become justification for dangerous physical behavior benefits all players and maintains the integrity of professional basketball competition. ESPN commentator Monica McNutt has developed a recognizable pattern in her basketball analysis that creates confusion among viewers and analysts alike. Her commentary style typically involves presenting accurate observations and logical reasoning throughout most of her analysis, only to reach conclusions that appear completely disconnected from the evidence she has just presented.
Assessing the Marina Mabrey situation. The referees did a great job assessing the Mabrey situation. That's a crazy one. That is a crazy one. And by the way, Sophie Cunningham deserved to be ejected, but so did Marina Mabrey. The fact that she stayed in the game is madness. She played they played pinball with her. Like, the Fever literally played pinball with her. Like, it's bad enough. Like, the whole situation was bad enough that my dad, who does not watch the WNBA, literally.
This analytical approach creates a jarring experience for audiences who find themselves agreeing with her initial points and supporting evidence, only to be bewildered when she arrives at conclusions that seem to contradict the very foundation she has established. The disconnect between her reasoning process and final judgments has become a defining characteristic of her commentary work. McNutt's recent analysis of a heated WNBA contest involving multiple controversial plays exemplified this pattern in dramatic fashion. Her commentary focused on defending the competitive intensity and physical nature of professional women's basketball, while making specific judgments about individual incidents that sparked widespread disagreement. Her primary assertions included defending the officiating crew's handling of several disputed situations, justifying certain physical actions as acceptable competitive behavior, and arguing against disciplinary measures that many observers considered appropriate given the circumstances.
Because it's very different in sports. It's not like what I would say. You could say with assault is like someone beating the crap out of somebody. But like, it is the next step below that. The only step above what Marina Mabrey did was had she swung at her. And by the way, even swinging at her might be less dangerous than what she did. At the same time, going for someone's knee is the most dangerous thing, is more dangerous than anything. And JC Sheldon didn't even get called for a foul. Didn't even
McNutt argued that Lindsay Allen should not have faced ejection for physically grabbing Sophie Cunningham around the neck area during a heated exchange. Her reasoning centered on the emotional intensity of competitive basketball and the natural responses that occurred during high-stakes moments. Regarding the controversial contact between JC Sheldon and Caitlin Clark that appeared to involve facial eye area contact, McNutt maintained that no flagrant foul designation was warranted. She characterized the incident as part of normal competitive basketball rather than conduct requiring enhanced penalties. McNutt supported the technical foul assessment against Clark for her reaction to the physical contact she received. This position suggested that players should absorb physical treatment without responding, regardless of the nature or legitimacy of the initial contact.
Literally, I was speaking to him today and he just goes, what's up with the referees in this league? It was like, it's bad enough. Like, my dad obviously would be a bigger tennis fan than basketball fan. And he was like, it was bad enough that Chris Everett is talking about it. It's in the news that Chris Everett is talking about it. And I'm like, oh my God. Like, what's going on? Like, I'm getting messages again with all these situations, like with some of my friends. Like, I'm there playing pickup with guys that kind of half know what I'm doing. They're like,
some analysts noted that while there may have been grounds for technical foul considerations in earlier exchanges during the first half of the game, the specific incident that resulted in the actual technical foul appeared to be a natural defensive reaction to aggressive treatment. Basketball analysts have raised concerns about the precedent that McNutt's reasoning could establish if adopted as standard practice. The logic suggests that teams could deploy a systematic strategy of assigning players to physically provoke opponents, knowing that any retaliatory response would result in technical fouls against the targeted player. This tactical approach would involve rotating different players to commit flagrant fouls and engage in physical provocation, then substituting those players out after achieving technical foul calls against opponents. Such a system could theoretically allow teams to eliminate star players through accumulated technical fouls without facing proportional consequences.
Didn't even get called for a foul when JC Sheldon went through Sid Colson's knee and nearly took her out. But took her out for a game anyway. But yeah, it's getting ridiculous now. Because it's like, does Caitlin talk trash? Yes. Do you want to know what that should lead to? Is JC Sheldon and Caitlin Clark clapping back at each other. Marina Mabrey hitting a shot and shit-talking Caitlin Clark. That is what trash talk should lead to. You should not...
The strategic implications extend beyond individual games to affect the fundamental competitive balance of professional basketball. When physical provocation receives less punishment than defensive reactions, it incentivizes dangerous behavior while penalizing natural self-protection responses. Perhaps the most controversial aspect of McNutt's commentary was her explicit praise for the officiating crew's handling of the Marina Mabrey situation. She characterized the referee's decisions as exemplary and appropriate given the circumstances of the game. This assessment directly contradicted the observations of numerous basketball experts who viewed the officiating as inadequate for controlling escalating tensions. McNutt's position suggested that allowing certain types of physical contact to continue without intervention represented proper game management. Her defense of the Mabrey incident specifically involved arguing that such physical encounters enhance the competitive atmosphere and should be encouraged rather than penalized. This perspective frames dangerous contact as entertainment value rather than safety concerns.
What the hell is up with the referees with Caitlin Clark? And I'm just like, I don't know. I don't even know at this stage. But Monica McNutt came out and said the referees did a perfect job. She justified the Mabrey hit. And by the way, she justified it in a way being like, yeah, you want to see that. You don't want the game to have to come to what Sophie Cunningham did. What Sophie Cunningham did, and like, this is when you know that what Sophie Cunningham did was needed, when Jamel Hill is defending Sophie.
McNutt's analysis acknowledged that Sophie Cunningham's eventual response required ejection, but she framed this as evidence that the escalating situation had been properly managed up to that point. Her reasoning suggested that allowing tensions to build until dramatic interventions became necessary represented successful officiating. The fact that veteran analysts like Jamel Hill defended Cunningham's actions as necessary enforcement highlighted how poorly the situation had been controlled by official oversight. When respected commentators view player enforcement as required, it typically indicates systematic officiating failures. The need for players to serve as enforcers generally signals that official control mechanisms have broken down to the point where participants must self-regulate through potentially dangerous means.
Like if you get flagrantly fouled because you're a trash talker, and people were like, oh, you know, with Larry Bird was a trash talker, and we saw Dr. J, what he did to Larry Bird, I'm like, dude, that was wrong 40 years ago, and it's wrong today. Like, we're literally looking at things that were wrong 40 years ago. They're like, oh, the Jordan rules, what the Bad Boy Pistons did. That was wrong 40 years ago. And they're like, being like, oh, yeah, you know, she's getting attacked like she's Jordan. And I'm like, they're like, oh, she's bringing it on herself. I'm not joking when I say
The controversy extended far beyond typical basketball analysis circles, drawing attention from sports figures and other disciplines and mainstream media coverage. The situation became significant enough that personalities from tennis and other sports began commenting on WNBA officiating standards. This cross-sport attention indicated that the officiating issues had reached a level of visibility that reflected poorly on professional basketball as a whole. When figures outside the basketball community begin questioning league standards, it suggests problems that extend beyond normal competitive disputes. The WNBA's subsequent response provided clear indication of how the league viewed the controversial officiating decisions. The absence of fines for coaches who criticized the officiating represented an unusual acknowledgement that official performance had been inadequate.
Cunningham. That's when you know you're like, you know what, this was needed. It was getting out of hand. Like someone needed to step up on the team. Someone needed to act as an enforcer. But at the end of the day, it's like I have to say, at the end of the day, when it comes to this scenario here, like everything that that Monica McNutt said was right.
The league's implicit acknowledgement that officiating improvements were needed provided some resolution to the immediate controversy. However, the broader questions about commentary standards and analytical consistency remain relevant for future coverage. The incident served as a reminder that proper officiating represents the foundation for maintaining competitive intensity within safe parameters. When official control breaks down, the resulting situations often require interventions that could have been avoided through proactive management. McNutt's commentary style will likely continue generating discussion about the relationship between analytical reasoning and conclusion formation in sports media. The pattern of accurate observations leading to questionable conclusions represents an ongoing challenge for audience understanding and professional credibility.